Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Our audience is so international that I honestly do not know what time zones you guys are in, but we are here in California. Some of us, other members of the team are in Europe, some in Eastern Europe, some in London. And if anything goes wrong technically, please forgive me. It's our first time we're doing it online, and I won't talk too much. So you saw the video, and that's an explanation why this year's symposium is produced in partnership with the Startup Network, because you've seen the 500 investors, 200 companies all over the world. The competition happened online, and actually they were the most active online platform already in this year. And as everything is so different, this event will be different too. And I'm as nervous as ever, even though it is our 18th symposium. And for those of you who have attended over the years, you know that the format is that we have one day the pitch competition, then we select the winners, and then the second day is when we talk about important issues. So we're going to give you a glimpse at what it was supposed to be. Now we will have two parts. So the first part is we'll listen to the winners of the pitch competition, which happened globally, and there were several hundred companies competing. And the judges, who are the investors, again, from all over the globe, and have selected one company from Europe, one from Asia, and one from the US. And as for people who would be listening to those winning companies, you all know them. The only person probably, no, actually you do know all of them. So it is my pleasure to introduce Giles Farley. He's a partner with ICU Ventures, and they are our partners for this year as well, and helped us produce this symposium together with the Startup Network. And Giles has been in business like forever. And I just won't do too much, because you guys can look on our website. All the profiles of the speakers are listed. So all I'll just say that they're with us right now, so that you know that yes, Giles Farley is here, Sean McGuire is here, Norm Fogelson is here, Pete Johnson is here, Scott Sandell is here. And we're going to start. And it is my pleasure to introduce the CEO of the Unicorn Battle, Anna Fedorova, who will take over for this part of the session. And the plan is that each company will speak for 5 minutes, and investors give the company feedback, live feedback, for the world to know what you think about that company. And then afterwards, the panel will discuss the investing during a crisis. We should be done by 11 a.m. today, at which point we will unmute everyone and all your faces will show up, and then you can talk to one another. And that's what we'll call the COVID networking. All right. It is my pleasure to introduce Anna Fedorova. Please jump in, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sasha. It's so great to be here today with you, and it's my pleasure to present the winners of the Unicorn Cups last season from all over the world. Let's start with Asia. Please meet Privy Technologies from Hong Kong, and David Lee, senior partner, will be presenting his company. David Lee, can you please share your screen? David?
Yes, hi Anna. Hi, how are you?
Hi, can you please put on your video so we can see your face?
Sure, I tried to put on, but it didn't let me do that, but let me just try it here. It says that the host isn't letting me show my video or show my face.
Ilya, please allow
okay,
David.
great.
Yeah.
Great.
We can see you.
Me?
Okay. If you're
Super.
ready, your 5 minutes starts right now. Go.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for this, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. My name is David Lee. This is a Lego box. For those who don't know about Legos, they're blocks that click together to make whatever you want. It could be an airplane, a building, a castle, or even a car. At Privé, we've taken the inspiration from Legos and applied it to wealth management. How do we do this? Through addressing this problem statement. Private banking cannot be for everyone. And why do people say this? First is cost. Wealth management today is still very manual and thus expensive. As a result, wealth management is not widely accessible, which leads to a very large addressable market. But on the other hand, digital transformation for banks is not that easy either. So how can we make this cannot into a can? Through our technology, which is made up of plug-and-play building blocks that can be assembled just like Legos. This allows us to land and expand in markets and capture market share. This also enables our clients, like banks, to construct a customized journey to serve their end customers. And the response has been tremendous. With 65 institutional clients, we have deployed our platform and have had traction in 16 countries. This has also enabled us to grow from Hong Kong to 6 more offices across the globe. We have also collected our fair share of awards. I guess you could say we really like awards. It helps us validate our technology, which leads us to our secret sauce, what I like to call the best team in fintech today. We are all expats who began here in our adopted home of Hong Kong, with 2 of us having been born and grown up in the States. But we don't want to stop there. We are also focused on our partnerships. Without them, it would have been difficult to scale our own platform. With these strategic partners, ultimately, our vision is to provide a bank-in-a-box technology to everyone for wealth management. But I know what you're thinking, David, this sounds so abstract. I kind of know what you do, but I also kind of don't. And don't worry, we've had this conversation many times before, so let me show you what kind of box we can build. With the help of Samsung and through Bixby, I'm very excited to introduce our newest wealth management box. Here you can see my portfolio in a snapshot. It can also alert me to tasks as well, such as updating my profile. But for now, let's ask a question. Hi, Bixby. Now I can ask a question or make a request, in this case, to help me become a millionaire. Bixby will then calculate an answer. You can see that it'll probably take me 12 years with my current portfolio, but I don't want to wait that long. So I will ask it to make it 10 years. Bixby will then start to create a new portfolio. It is suggesting adding more funds to get to my goal of becoming a millionaire in 10 years. And it sounds reasonable, so I say, okay, let's do it. Bixby has found 3 funds, in this case, that match my profile and preferences, out of which I can choose one of the 3. So let's choose the first one. This fund has exposure to Alibaba, but let's say I don't know much about Alibaba, so I ask it to tell me more about Alibaba. Bixby will then pull up the necessary information, and this includes content such as news from which I can make an investment decision. And after reviewing, I say, okay, let's buy the fund. Bixby will then show me my new portfolio versus my old one and the relevant trades. It will also ask me how I want to execute. Given Bixby knows my preference, it already suggests HSBC, which I confirm, and I instruct Bixby to buy the fund. After buying the fund, Bixby will then complete the transaction, and it will also update my broker and advisor. So, in short, we have taken an advisor that is in the palm of your hand and transformed wealth management into a conversation. My name is David. We are Privé. Thank you for listening, and this is our story.
You are just on time. Wonderful. Can we have some feedback, please, regarding what you just heard? Anyone would like to start?
This sounds like a very interesting opportunity. How do you deal with various regulations across the world with all of your products?
Yes, so for us, I think that's a key stumbling block for many fintech companies. But because we're an open platform, much like a OneConnect or an InvestNet or even an Adapar or an InvestCloud, what we're able to do is to partner with local financial companies. Because let's face it, to be honest, Samsung doesn't care about being a neobank. In fact, it could be furthest away from being a financial institution. Their main focus is to sell as many phones as possible and ensure that your next phone is a Samsung phone. So what they'll do is they'll say, okay, in Hong Kong, who is the biggest, baddest player here? HSBC. We will go to HSBC. They will plug into our platform, which we plug into Bixby. And as a result, we are that platform that is the conduit that enables all this technology and services to come to life. And on one hand, Samsung loves it because it creates a sticky ecosystem, much like Samsung Pay, Samsung Fitness, Samsung Health. At the same time, the HSBC people like it because it provides engagement, not just from their app, but from other mediums as well.
Excellent. And then my last question was on risk. And as you adjust your portfolio to be more productive, how do you show the increased risk that the customer would be taking?
Yes, so there's a variety of ways of showing risk. We would do that through mostly from the actual institution that's underlying it, because for us, we're different from a robo-advisor, that we're not a black box. We actually take the investment preferences from that individual enterprise client. And this is what I mean by building blocks and Lego blocks, because wealth is very personal. Each bank and each institution perceives wealth differently for itself and its end clients. The way that it classifies its assets, to the way that it guides investment preferences, to the way that it measures risk, both on the product side and on the customer side. So for us, we're able to plug that in through our configurable ecosystem and architecture. And so we're able to make it much more personal and bespoke. And that's the reason why we've been able to expand to over 65 enterprise clients around the world.
David, I really enjoyed that. It's a great presentation, and there is a lot happening in your industry right now that creates an opportunity kind of for disruption, especially the shift towards zero commission trading. One question for you, what portion of the market segment are you targeting? Like, are you trying to sell to the biggest institutional wealth managers, or to the mid-market, or down to the independent advisors?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Do you mind if I can share my screen just for a bit here, if that's okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. So let me just show you, I think this sort of goes to the story of what Privé is. And if you think of us as a novel and a book, what happened was that we have many chapters. And the first chapter began, just like you said, is to sort of talk to the smaller, more, I guess, smaller SME people that were more the financial advisors and EMs that needed a system or platform to address, aggregate their clients' wealth and show it in a way where it's a 360-degree view of one portfolio over many custodians. And so when Charles and Julian, the two co-founders along with myself, when we started, essentially what happened was that these were the groups that needed the most help. And so we formed a platform whereby we had created a functional one. And at the end of chapter one, if that's chapter one, we had validation in the fact that there were 15 to 20 that actually bought into the system. And then to answer your other question in terms of who we cater to now, is we're in chapter two. And chapter two is that enterprise client, because we wanted to build an end-to-end bank-in-a-box solution that could transform wealth management across many different segments, essentially to democratize wealth management from people that had $25 million and to enable them to people that had much less in terms of wealth, but still sizable wealth maybe, to get that type of service. And that's where we went ahead and we partnered up with the likes of Citibank and all these different larger institutions to create that service, because we knew that the financial advisors and EMs, although they were very passionate about this, they just didn't have the pocketbook to help us fund from a bootstrapping perspective, our company. And then at the end of chapter two, we ended up getting a Series A investment from Credit Suisse and from Samsung, who were also our clients at the time. And now we're in chapter 3 and 4, which essentially is to convert our SaaS revenue model into an AUM model, much like InvestNet and OneConnect. And of course, chapter 4, which is that all-encompassing non-financial partnership with the likes of Samsung to then perpetuate and essentially spread out the idea of wealth management, so you could essentially manage your wealth much like you're ordering a pizza or finding a restaurant.
Thank you, David. That was your 5 minutes for getting feedback. You can always continue in chat or afterwards, whatever Sasha will tell us to do. And we should move on. And we are going
to our companies presenting. If you take too long to answer a question, it means you will not give time to other investors to ask their questions. So please use your 5 times for feedback efficiently. Because I'm sure that everyone had another question or two, but because
I got a
David, you
question.
okay.
I got a question, Sasha, that won't take long to answer. Has being located in Hong Kong influenced your behavior in the last year?
We're a global company with 6 other offices across the globe. So essentially, we're able to deploy our technology pretty much anywhere. Oh, by the way, sir, I love your name, Pitch Johnson. That's great.
Well, yeah, it's sort of a bad name for a venture capitalist, but it's part of the lexicon of the business. So in
I'll
other
never
words,
forget that name.
HBSC, for instance, has pulled a lot of its operations from around the world, so, but anyway, being in Hong Kong has not been a disadvantage to you.
Well, it is a disadvantage most recently, and I have to admit, due to the securities laws and obviously the political undermining and turmoil here. So to be honest, Mr. Johnson, we've actually are moving our operations into Singapore and into the UK right now as we speak.
Thank you. And you can call me Pitch.
Okay, thank you.
As a
That makes it
UK
worthwhile.
person,
Thank you.
as a UK person, I'm so happy to hear there is a business moving to the UK at the moment. Thank you, David.
No
All
problem.
right.
Thanks.
Anna, move.
Thank
Anna,
you,
move.
David. Yes, Sasha is pushing me to be more serious in that. I'll do that. We're moving to Europe. Please welcome Submer Next Gen Data Center from Spain, and Paul Walls Solar, as CEO of this company, will be presenting. Paul.
Thank you. So hi, I'm Paul, co-founder of Submer, and we are disrupting the data center and internet infrastructure. Data centers, as of today, and in the internet infrastructure and compute consumes more than India, actually 6% of the global electricity, and it's moving towards 1/5 of the global electricity by 2025. It's crazy. We see also a lot of macroeconomic and macro, I would say, governmental objectives in terms of carbon emissions. For instance, in Europe, we see a clear gap between the current trend and the actual objective, so we can help closing this gap. That's why we are good at raising public funds and grants. Another important thing is the impact and sustainability of these massive data centers. They basically, an average data center consumes the amount of water in an Olympic swimming pool every 2 days. So also a huge waste. Another important factor is the cost of the brick and mortar and the content in itself. It is estimated that per megawatt of compute, you spend $6 to $10 million only in the building itself. And you can see more than 150 megawatt data centers in the North Virginia area in the data center alley. And this basically, they try to be more efficient by having these centralized big buildings, but this has, of course, problems of latency. So usually hyperscalers tend to bring back again the compute next to the city centers and the user bases so that you can reduce this physical distance that basically affects these delays in the internet communications. Apart from also quality problems in the air, like contamination, particles in suspension, humidity, and so on, because they try to use free air cooling to avoid air conditioning costs. Another important factor of this is basically the increase of gigawatts of power being deployed worldwide. And also regarding the brick and mortar, the building of these data centers becomes something like basically a building project, which takes a lot of time and it's very expensive. So hyperscalers tend to book power, real estate, network from colocation data centers while they test the regions before building their infrastructure and also in parallel building their own buildings. And apart from what I've already mentioned regarding low latency applications, 5G, IoT, connected cars, machine to machine, etc., all these low latency applications, we also have the problem converging of the higher density applications. So all these hype in AI, blockchain, etc., behind the scenes require very powerful equipment. GPU-based ASICs, FPGAs, hardware that in the same space generates much more heat. So basically, we solve all these problems thanks to our full stack technology, a hardware plus software plus chemical, and now also robotics technology that allows us to submerge any kind of compute in our baths filled with our smart coolant. And we have what we call the cooling distribution units that monitor the temperature, flow rate, the level of this fluid, and move it in the most efficient way to extract the heat. This way, we can have 10x more density. So basically saving 85 to 90% of the real estate by using this more powerful equipment. We can save 50% of the operational costs because we don't need all these expensive and very powerful air conditioning systems and so on. But also at the IT level, we optimize the IT usage effectiveness by removing fans. We don't need them. We are totally agnostic to the hardware, as you can see here. We also save 50% of the capex. We don't need the false ceilings, cold aisles, raised flooring, et cetera, so all these brick and mortar costs. And then we don't waste any water. So we can even empower the circular economy and reuse the heat that the compute generates for other purposes like district heating or industrial processes and so on. The market is massive. It's growing at a 2-digit rate. Our vision is to become the de facto way of building data centers, or at least becoming the key piece of the puzzle to make them more efficient, sustainable, and basically powerful, thanks to our automated, also immersion cooled warehouses. We are ahead of our competitors. We are confident we have the best technology out there. We move faster in a year than our closest competitor in 10 because we have the full stack technology and we work with agile software-like methodologies and all these stack of technologies we have. We have all the kinds of skill sets in the company. We are moving towards, basically, we are now selling and integrating our technology. So the main business model is a hardware, basically, selling business model, but we are transitioning towards a more services and in the future software platform thanks to our robotization of the infrastructure. So we are building technologies around autonomous managed services because we can operate the cooling for the first time the same way we can operate the IT. We have some happy customers, Digital Realty in the US, Etisalat in the Middle East, for instance, Airbus, the European Commission, Europol. We have Saudi Telecom and many others, including 2 of the biggest 10 hyperscalers in the world. We will basically, we are around
time, Paul, I'm
Thank you very
sorry.
much.
It was your 5 minutes.
Yeah,
now you have
sorry.
5 minutes for the feedback. If anyone would like to start.
I'll jump in. It's a terrific presentation, Paul, and it looks like a really terrific idea. What's the major objection that you have when you're going to customers? Is it that it requires a large upfront investment? Do they have competitive technologies? Is it that you are not being able to sell it as a service at the moment? Are there competitive technologies which allow them to reduce costs in this manner?
So that's a good question. One of the biggest challenges we face is basically getting to know our technology deeply enough so that they understand how this works. So basically education, but this is something that it becomes much easier over time because it is something basically that becomes more straightforward to think about liquid cooling in the data center more and more over time. So we have the best liquid cooling technology, and this is a nice way of basically coming from other on-chip liquid cooling technology and so on, we can put the foot on the door. And from there, basically, it is dealing with partners. So we are moving towards go-to-market with partners and going hand by hand with the OEMs. We work with IBMs, Fujitsu, etc., Dells, and so on, to make sure that the customer can integrate easily the technology. And one of the main things we were able to do is creating this agnosticity on the hardware compatibility and so on. So this basically people asking about the hardware, how they integrate and so on, but we can overcome those things.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to know something from Paul?
Yeah, Paul, I'm still a little confused about your business model. It sounds like you have some wonderful technology. You've got a huge market opportunity and a great value proposition. But when you say you're moving to more of a services model, are you building and owning data centers and then renting out the services, or some other model that's not quite as clear to me?
No, we don't want to compete with the big hyperscalers. We want to basically become an enabler for them for becoming more efficient, sustainable, and dense. Our model as of today is basically selling and integrating our technology to end customers, data centers, or through a partner. And the thing is that we are seeing opportunities on basically thanks to the integration of our technology on traditional data centers or at the edge, for instance, for telcos, et cetera, we are seeing an extra services or upselling opportunities for either maintenance and integration services from our software stack, and also somehow financial tools like leasing, renting of the technology so that they can pay per use our infrastructure. What we are building as of today is the autonomous robotic platform. So our CTO, the former infrastructure director from Apple and Yahoo, based in the Bay Area, has, of course, this great vision on the hyperscale and is able to basically create this perfect product market fit with the hyperscalers, so that we are understanding deeply the pains they have, and we are basically building this somehow robotic platform that allows us to charge for managing nodes in your data center. So this will be, of course, the future business model on top of the existing ones.
What sort of gross margins do you achieve? I'm sorry, Scott.
No, I just said thank you, Paul. Go ahead, Mark.
Follow on to Scott's question. What sort of a gross margin do you achieve with a large component of services in your business model?
Yeah, so we have healthy margins. I'm sure, I think I cannot disclose certain financial things publicly here, but I'm happy to discuss this with you if you want. But we are good because we are like a hardware company that leverages the growth of the software somehow technologies, but also with a piece of component that people is willing to pay a lot of money for, because we are the key technology that solves the major challenges they have now, that centers efficiency, density, and sustainability. So basically, we have I would say a healthy margin here.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else? We have 50 seconds to go. If not, we'll move on. Okay, thank you, Paul.
Pleasure.
And next stop is North America. The representative of the USA, Kumesh Arumugan, who is the co-founder and CEO of Wonderful Awesome.
Oh, thanks a lot, Anna. Hey, everyone.
Starts right now.
Great. Thanks, Anna. Hey, guys, I'm Kumesh Arumugan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Axern. So a little about us is we have a no-code AI platform that is built specifically for financial services. And on our no-code AI platform, financial service companies can actually build and deploy different types of AI use cases very quickly within a few minutes to speed up innovation, accelerate innovation within their workplace. And these types of use cases are workflow automation use case or real-time decision-making use case using AI predictions. So in terms of the big problem, when you look at a large organization, there's a lot of different business units that's giving a lot of different use case requests that are R&D and IT teams, and only a small amount of use case are actually being implemented. We want to basically solve this problem by increasing the number of implementation that's out there. So with our solution, with our no-code platform, we can actually accelerate this by 3,000 times faster. So typically to implement a single use case and operationalize AI, takes about 3,000 hours with a team of 6 months. With Axern, it takes about 40 hours, and with our AI marketplace, it takes about an hour. And with our platform, there's 4 steps to actually building and operationalize an AI use case. You select your data or upload your own. You can select your taxonomy to filter your data with key information that you care about. You select your NLP models to summarize your data, do foreign language translation, derive sentiment, create predictions, and so forth. And you can deliver and export your data into a lot of different stuff like Snowflake, Excel, Power BI, and all these different delivery mechanisms. And with our AI marketplace, we have over 400 pre-built financial service use case for asset management, insurance, and banks that you can activate with a single click and actually deploy within your organization and speed up your AI innovation internally. In terms of market size, we're targeting financial services, $47 billion market, and our end users are basically data scientists, business analysts, data engineers, and developers within the R&D teams. Business model is pure SaaS subscriptions. So if you're on the premium plan, it's $5,000 a month, and that gets you about 1 million documents processed and analyzed back to you. The more documents you process, the more we're going to charge you, and we can increase this cost. Or one of our biggest clients is about 1 million+ contract across 5 years. In terms of customer metrics, 2.9 million ARR right now, and we have about 40 customers. And these are some of the top customers that we have, which is Allianz. Some of the use case they're using us for is basically plugging in all their Salesforce meeting notes, and we're able to analyze these meeting notes, identifying which meetings are going well, which one aren't, and we're sending alert notifications back. Other ones around enhancing their credit risk model with real-time credit-related data. So there's a lot of different use cases going on here. One of our customer, we saved 10 million in 4 years from them building the same exact technology. These are our partners, and this is how we're able to generate massive amount of leads and win a lot of new customers. So these are all very strategic distribution channels, especially like NVIDIA and HP. We're going to be potentially getting into all of the HP enterprise computers and being distributed to a lot of large enterprises. Competitive landscape, the main difference here is that there's a lot of horizontal focused players, and we're a vertically focused player. So a lot of our technology has been focused on financial services with extremely high accuracy in terms of the financial models that we currently have, like the NLP models and so forth. And then we have both text analytics and predictive analytics capability in the same exact platform, which a lot of our customers want. In terms of leadership, co-founder and CEO of Axner was previously at Citi. My co-founder and CTO did his PhD in big data analytics at NYU. And then we have other leadership like our chief marketing officer, who's the co-founder and CMO of DigitalOcean, which is a $1 billion unicorn in New York City. Investment traction, we raised over 15 million so far in our Series A, and lead investor is Fusion Fund in Silicon Valley, and we have Allianz Ventures as well as our backer and other VCs within the company. So that's about it. Went pretty fast, but I'll open up for questions now.
You saved yourself 45 seconds. That is good. Now we can move to feedbacks.
Kumesh, from my standpoint, I think that the presentation would benefit this kind of technology. If I understand it's a vertically integrated or vertically focused robotic process automation. Maybe I have that a little bit wrong. I think it would benefit from a specific use case, maybe even a demo, so that we can understand a little more. I think the presentation is rather abstract. Please feel free to give one now.
Sure, sounds good. So in terms of the use case, I'll just talk about it. One of the use cases that Allianz Life is using us for is basically anti-money laundering fraud detection analysis. So what we're able to do is every time someone applies for a life insurance policy or so forth, we're able to take that person's name or that company name and run a trace on 8 years of public news and blog data and start tagging all these articles with anything that's related to fraud or fraudulent activity and send that notification back to Allianz. The same exact thing we can apply to companies like Norges Bank or Nordea, that on the coverage banking side, we can track real-time information that's happening with their clients and send them alert notification if something goes wrong, so they can get those types of information back. And these are use cases they can all build in our platform in a no-code fashion without using our help.
Thank you.
Anyone would like to ask something? It's your chance. Attendees can also write down questions in Q&A, and I will announce them.
I would just ask Kumesh, what's the history of the company? It just on your LinkedIn, it said you started in 2013, but then your CTO joined in 2018. Like, was there kind of a different product, or was it consulting for a few years and then it became a product? Like, what's the history?
Yeah, no, so I started in 2013, the CTO and co-founder started in 2014. So it's only a year delta. And then we went on product development for about 3 years, and we operationalized this in 2017. And then that's when we started getting a lot of traction, the revenues, and the timing was just right because a lot of people were looking for AI solutions and workflow automation type of softwares.
If I looked at your capital structure, you've got a note outstanding right now, and you're requesting an additional $2 million to be invested in the note. Is that correct?
Yes, 2 million at a 40 million cap, but we have 700K that's left in that.
Okay, I was just going to ask why 2 million was the right number. Should it be 1? Should it be 5? What was your thinking there?
Yeah, so that capital is just for experimental capital in terms of deploying this in our sales and customer success team. It's basically understanding how can we double down to certain KPIs and improve our customer acquisition costs and so forth, just to prove out some of the metrics for Series B. Since we're going to be going for a Series B in Q1 or Q2 of next year, we want to make sure that we are able to prove that some of these KPIs we're going to double down to are actually valid and so forth. So that's kind of what we're using the capital for right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kumesh. 2 more minutes?
Does Kumesh have more time? If Kumesh, if you
Yes,
have more
2
time,
2 more minutes, Jill. Yes.
well, let's make sure we use it all. Kumesh, maybe you could talk a little bit about what a typical integration looks like and how plug and play your technology is versus the need to either customize or train users at the customer.
Good question. So 70% of our customers are on our cloud. So they're basically using our platform on our cloud where we manage and host. For a customer to use our platform on the cloud, we just give them a user and password. They log into the platform. They can select from a pre-built financial AI use case and deploy that immediately. And in terms of integration, we took care of that problem for our customer because we have a lot of pre-built integration into the common workflow systems that they currently are using, like Excel, Power BI, Salesforce, and so forth. So they don't need to involve an engineering team or integrator to do that. So that process is completely taken care of. But then we have another deployment option, which 30% of our customers are on, which is on-prem. So we can deploy our software on the customer's cloud service provider, depending on where they're at. So they can upload or sensitive private data for analysis.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you, Kumesh. And that was it for the pitch session. Back to you, Sasha.
Thank you, Anna. But before this session is over, I have a question for all of our investors. Say a company has a chance to pitch to you. 3 minutes, 5 minutes. They met you somewhere, be it Silicon Valley or London. How would an entrepreneur or founder grab your attention? Say you have 3 minutes, like what would be your recommendation? And actually I would like each one of you say something. Like what should an entrepreneur do to grab your attention if it has only 5 minutes? In whatever order, or I'll call on you.
I'm happy to go first. After you, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the thing that I think is most important to get across is the value proposition of the product, and whether it's a game changer for the customer, whether that's a consumer or an enterprise. That's the thing that gets my attention the most, because if it is a really strong value proposition, it can usually break through and create either a new market or disrupt an existing one. But without a strong value proposition, customers usually stick with whatever they're using today.
I agree with that. I was going to say the same thing. I mean, to put it in real plain language, what problem are you solving for the customer and from the customer's perspective? And when you have a really clear idea about that, I think it grabs you immediately. I'll add too, by the way, that and you know, we're based in Europe. Many of the companies we deal with are in Eastern Europe. When we see when you're not just in an elevator but actually presenting, to the extent that you can do a really quick demo of the product, that's also very helpful. Just so you get that visualization.
I like to hear about the people. Who's on the management team? Who's the entrepreneur? What was that epiphany moment where they said, ha, this is something I have to go and do? And then see how that's folded out to the way they've rolled out their business.
Sean?
One thing that's not too different from others, but I love hearing a unique insight, like something that I've never thought about that was kind of either the eureka moment or just some different lens of viewing the world that gives them a unique advantage and perspective.
Pitch, are you going to say anything, or should we move to the panel on investing during a crisis? Would you comment on how a company will grab your attention? No? Okay. All right.
So we have one question from the attendees. Can we?
Which is?
For David Lee, is your solution applicable in South Africa? If so, how?
Yes, hi again. Yes, yes, it is. I mean, we've scaled our system so it's multi-jurisdictional, multi-language, multi-asset, and that's the way I think wealth management is going to go, because everybody wants to see it in one fell swoop. So yes, the answer is yes, and we've done it before with Citi, which is public knowledge, so we can go ahead and say that. We're deployed across 12 countries in 7 different languages across 3 continents. For Citibank. So once again, we've talked to several IFAs and EAMs in South Africa as well, but we haven't gotten a real use case yet, but if we can, that'd be great. Thank you.
David, could you ever work with Apple, or are you exclusive with Samsung?
This is a non-exclusive agreement. That's that's absolutely right, and we're more than happy to work with Apple, Google, whomever. We're really excited about the business, and we're really passionate about it too.
All right, well, thank you so much. And now we will talk about investing during a crisis. And when we were selecting a topic, well, obviously, we're not talking anymore about going to normal. Nobody knows what normal is. But one thing is certain, that people on this panel have survived more than one crisis. And I'm talking about the investment cycles. And with the big firms like NAA and ADP and Sequoia and asset management, probably whatever you want to share. Like, what is it? What is the first thing you do when you realize that the world is changing? What have you done before? We can start in any order, or like anybody wants to start, because I would like to hear each one of you. Norm, would you like to start?
Sure. When a crisis appears, I think there's a degree of uncertainty, but you try to say, how bad is it? Have we just had a nuclear war? Are things that bad, or is it more of a perturbation that might be short term? I think with COVID, the thing that's difficult is you don't really know for how long it's going to be bad. I think we can all see there will be a vaccine at the other end. And we've talked to some people who are friends who have worked on the AIDS vaccine, and they say, yes, there will be a vaccine, but it may not be widely distributed until 2022. So in this particular case, in this crisis, just adjust your investment philosophy and make sure that the companies that you invest in, they can take advantage of this opportunity, like Zoom, have enough capital to get through this big trough and make it to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that, Sasha, that we have to recognize is, and we do, that the end of this will be nothing like the beginning. In other words, there will be many things about the investment climate and investment opportunities that will be far different from what they were a year ago when we entered this thing. And I think everybody recognizes that, but making a guess and preparing for the opportunities that will be in existence and are created by the changes, permanent changes, is an important insight to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sean, would you agree with that? I know that you probably yourself, you're the youngest on this panel, but if you take the experience of Sequoia in general, can you comment?
I've been investing for 20 something years, so not nearly as much experience as the other folks on the line, but have invested through a few crises. I think two things from Sequoia. One, and it's related to Pitch's comment, but this is a crisis that kind of has affected different industries disproportionately. Some it's helped, some it has hurt. And the way that we've been describing that is that it kind of pulled the future that we were already investing towards forwards by about 10 years in terms of the shift towards digital and remote work. And, I think many people on the sign had already been investing in tooling for that world, meal delivery, things like that, all being helped meaningfully, whereas some industries have just gotten, very disproportionately negatively affected. And so with that in mind, you need to think about which businesses you're investing in now will have a permanent, enduring bump from COVID, you say permanent change in consumer demand and behavior, versus just a short-term bump and you may be misled by getting involved now.
Yeah. Scott, are you going to comment?
Scott, you're muted.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. The power went out here in New York City, so I didn't hear Pitch's comments, so I can't react to them. But what I would say is, you asked for two things, Sasha. The first is cash is king. The company, we try to get our companies to be as efficient as possible, especially in a crisis. If nothing else, it extends the time they have to figure it out and see how the world will unfold. And secondly, we try to figure out what sorts of companies will survive and ultimately thrive in the new environment, whatever that might be. And in each and every crisis, it's different. But as Sean was alluding to, it wasn't too many months into this one before it became very obvious what kinds of businesses would thrive and what kinds would be really challenged.
Yeah, actually, I'm quite interested in that particular insight. I know it's hard to crystal ball now and figure out what will happen. But if you were to generally comment on industries, we know that the travel industry probably was hit the hardest. But what other industries you think will be totally reconfigured going forward? Anybody?
Well, I mean, one of the things that struck me was we saw this company, I think it was Privé, the one which is helping wealth management organizations become digital. We've seen a lot of organizations across many different verticals basically accelerating their transition to vertical, because in the case of a bank or a wealth management organization, nobody wants to go to their office anymore. So they have to figure out how to become digital. And most of them have been struggling to do that because it hasn't been quite as much of an imperative up to this point. And so one class of things that we see today are typically software companies, which are working with incumbents to try to help them essentially move their business online.
Backed up what Scott just said, I think that the idea when things get back to normal, people will be going to the offices. There'll be a huge amount of working at home. We all know that. And the question is, in what way? And Scott mentioned the digitization of things. So I think that there's two kinds of problems. And it's a little late for the first one. The first one was, what can we back and what will help cure the situation that we're in, particularly about drugs and opportunities caused by it. The second is, what will be permanent? What things won't change? Sean has redwood trees in the background, which is a terrific example. There's some things that are just constant. Redwood trees get burned and all kinds of storms, but they stick with us. There's some parts of our business of what people need, but the other part is that what people need has been changed a lot by the COVID. Some things caused directly by the COVID, and some by changing the way we'll live. So I just think that the working at home is going to be very major, and very few people will be going to offices every day when we get into the future. And so servicing those kinds of people, and that's a market that is big and going to stay big after this so-called everybody's worried about getting sick.
Pitch, I agree with that. I'm sorry.
Please, no, go ahead.
I agree with your comment. And one of the things that's happened with a more distributed workforce is security. Large enterprises have had trouble anyway securing their employee base and their secrets, but now that people are working from home, it just compounds that by a factor of 10. So we see a lot of security propositions these days, and I think many of those will be deployed.
Yeah, but then if you go back and looking at companies like IBM and Cisco and Airbnb and Groupon and Slack, they all got started during a previous crisis. What do you think those companies, how did they were startups back then. So I guess my question is, if you are a startup, and this is an opportunity, as people like to say that a crisis is a great time to start companies. So what would you recommend to people beginning those companies? Just go and attack the giants, or go into an industry that seems to be in disarray and try to change that? Like, what should they do? Or should they just continue the course, whatever they were going to do before? How did Cisco happen, for example?
Others will have more historical context than myself, but I'll just say, as someone that lived very closely through 2008, I think this is a very different environment. Like, yes, it's true that many of the great companies of today were formed in that recession, and one of the biggest advantages they had was there was much less competition for engineering talent. And one of the differences with this crisis is that because some of the companies were so disproportionately helped, you know, the Zooms of the world, the haves of the world, there was like a 1 or 2 month period in April, May, where it was much easier to hire great engineers, where some of the behemoths had laid off engineers when they were adjusting this new reality. But that time passed very, very quickly. And the battle for engineering talent right now is just as hot or difficult as it was in February, or maybe even more so, because some of these companies are just being so accelerated. And so that's one major difference between now and I think the dot-com bust and 2007-8. And so I still think there's opportunity to create some big companies, but I think it'll be for a very different reason than in the past. It'll be, you know, people that are, say, creating tooling for this new digital work from home hybrid model, where some of those companies are able to grow very, very quickly. Or Scott's comment or Norm's comment around security, like, I think there's a few categories, but it's, if you look at what happened in 2008, it was more that some of these radical ideas were able to get the great engineers that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to get, and then grow from there.
No. Okay. Anybody else wants to comment? Pitch, I think that
I would jump in, Sasha, and just add one thing onto Sean's comments, which is to reflect back on the crisis before the global financial crisis that we all remember, which was the dot-com crisis, and to think about what's different between that crisis, the global financial crisis, and this crisis. And it seems to me that one thing that is really different across each of them, but is an evolution of the same thing, is that in the dot-com collapse of 2000, there were very, you know, the internet, it was all about the internet, but the internet was small. It wasn't capable of very much. There were only 400 million people connected to it. And so the only companies that survived were the ones that could address the whole market, like Google and Amazon. Anybody that was going after something that was a niche business wasn't going to serve enough people. And then in the global financial crisis, it was more about the disruption of all businesses due to the financial turmoil. But the internet was already bigger and at scale. That's why companies like Groupon could take off. But I think what's happening now is that the internet is fully scaled and is incredibly capable. And so it's just accelerating this trend towards a fully digital world in a way that I think will be permanent. Back to Pitch's earlier comment, what's temporary, what's permanent? I think what's happening right now is we're seeing, it's sort of the last, bowling pin going down. And everything is now just tipping in favor of businesses that are digitized online and serving customers on their mobile devices. Norm, you're on mute.
I think we want to keep investing during a crisis. As difficult as things are, there are still new ideas that are being developed by entrepreneurs, new ideas in the laboratory that will come forward. And part of what will be different from 10 years from now is things that we don't even know about today. But you could take a guess at something like the human silicon interface and how that might evolve over a 10-year period of time. And so we're paying attention to the crisis, but we shouldn't be distracted about it. We have to keep an open mind to continue to look for new things.
Yeah. So, okay, everything will be digitized. I get it. But let's talk about something like education. And people have children or grandchildren or in general. If everything is digitized, how would that human element continue with the network, which is other than the social network? Will there be technology that will create something that will be semblance of an interaction for children, or do you actually believe it will be all online period going forward?
Oh, I think it's going to be a hybrid, Sasha. I think, the digitization of education has been dramatically accelerated. We've seen this through the lens of Coursera, where we've been involved, since it started, and it was a really nice growing business, but it has completely accelerated because of the shift to more or less full-time online education at the higher, at the university and graduate level. But I think what we'll see is that as people are safer and safer going back to campus, they're not going to forget about online education. They're just going to use it where it applies best and mix it with where an in-person experience is still superior.
Yeah, I fully agree with Scott there that it'll be some hybrid. And in my personal view, the actual instruction and learning piece, I think, is oftentimes better online, or at least is trending in that direction, where you can do things like learning through games, which are very interactive, or finding the best instructor in the world, and that person can teach to many people. But then there's the huge component of education, which is the physical interaction and learning how to be a great human, and all the other skills. And I think that's in-person human touch is irreplaceable for that. And so I would separate out those two pieces is how I think about it, and we'll probably have some hybrid solution.
Communication and education is not words and facts. It's people sensing what people are thinking, the communications they do by their actions and their eyes, and the even emotions are going to have to stick with that. So we'll have plenty of at some point where it's safe in-person education. As you pointed out, obviously other stuff can be done better, but there's some things you just can't do remotely. You got to be person to person.
Yeah, we'll need to figure it out somehow. So now that everything is online, the question is, how do you guys do due diligence? If you cannot visit a company, cannot really talk to them other than online, has the switch happened? Is it possible to really figure out the business by just having meetings online? And how many meetings do you have? And is the due diligence process longer as a result, or is it the same? Like, how does it work now?
Well, I don't know about others, but I think in our experience, first of all, a lot of the due diligence that was done before was done on the telephone or examining data sets that could be exchanged digitally and the like. But I think you're referring to the in-person component. And I think that has been, in my experience, remarkably good on Zoom, and it's gotten better and better. I think people have gotten better at figuring out how to present themselves on Zoom, and consequently you can have a pretty intimate conversation with one or two people, but particularly if it's one-on-one. I conducted 3 interviews for board candidates about 2 weeks ago, and one of my takeaways at the end of that experience was, I don't really need to meet those people. I feel pretty good about who they are, and I don't think I would gain that much by meeting them. But that doesn't mean that in person isn't valuable. Of course it's valuable, and we try to do it wherever we can, but we recognize that it's not always possible in this environment, and for the most part, we've gotten over that.
Yeah.
So
The same.
I was going to say something that I think most VCs would agree with, that everyone's talking about right now in the investor community, is that the time frame to make decisions during coronavirus has been shortened dramatically. There's a lot of reasons why potentially, but there's been a lot of kind of shotgun decisions where in the past where you'd maybe have 2 to 3 weeks to make a decision on an investment opportunity. Right now you have a few days, and it makes it very hard to do anything other than have hours of conversations on Zoom rather than going and meeting the person, face to face if you can. So it's been very interesting that way. The time frame has accelerated dramatically.
Well,
We found that we've been able to continue to make investments, and we've made some where we've never met the team in person. One of the benefits of Zoom is that you can actually meet the entire management team. And frequently, if a CEO or one of his team members is coming by to pitch, you might only meet 1 or 2 people. But through Zoom, maybe not all in the one-on-one sessions like Scott's board candidate interview, but when a team is presenting, you can actually get a better sense of who they all are. So we found that to be a plus.
Don Valentine and I used to argue about when we were on panels together. By the way, we're just coming about 1 year since Don died, and but was Don would say and believed that the markets are what count, that what the people are terribly important, but the markets are what count. In my point of view, not necessarily a correct one, was that what really counts are the people, and markets and products can only be valuable when they're made valuable by good people. And I think that the emphasis on people that I like to make will get back to a more what I call normal, because we'll want to meet people to talk to them about their deals, their sense of conviction. Sure, some of that happens on Zoom and online, but there's this, as I said earlier, there's something about being with someone and sensing his or her emotions and his drive, and especially how they communicate their desire is partly nonverbal. And I feel we'll get back to much more in person when it becomes safer to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Speaking of Zoom, why do you think Zoom has happened while we, at that point, we had Skype and WebEx and all kinds of other video services? Will you comment on the phenomenon of Zoom? Why Zoom and not anything else, not Skype?
I'll make at least one comment here, and sorry, I had some technical issues and was out for a little while.
I was wondering what happened to you. Okay.
But I think Zoom is really focused on the customer experience, and it's just got a really wonderful interface. I know at times that they've had issues with security, and that sometimes when you're dealing with larger institutions, you get pushed back to Cisco and enterprise type conference facilities. But I think Zoom has done a really wonderful job of creating an interface where you feel like whether you're on your phone, on your computer, on your sort of any touch point, you can get on that call, and it's very simple to manage, and it just sort of works very well. And I don't think the back-end technology is very complicated, but user experience really matters. And I think from a timing perspective, sometimes you just get lucky.
Yeah, I happen to have been an investor in WebEx way back in the day, and Eric came out of WebEx, so we had the chance to back Zoom, I think, but we were in a competing company, so we couldn't do it, which makes this the biggest miss of my 25-year career. But I think if you think about the strategy, the product strategy that delivered what Gilles is saying, it was that Zoom was the first of these companies to focus on a mobile app experience. They built a great mobile app, which delivered a superior end user experience. The prior companies just before that were all browser based, which turned out to be inferior.
I also want to say, and obviously Scott, he's underplaying himself. He was on the board of WebEx, and that was a fantastic investment of the era. I will push on Giles' comment about the back end, where I didn't live through it. Sequoia is on the board of Zoom, but I know a little bit about networking, and the way I understand it is that Eric actually made pretty major investment in kind of some overlay networks at the edge. So called a bunch of overlay networks close to where the end consumers would be living, so that you'd have a much better performance than public internet, and then rely on kind of long haul traffic, which is generally pretty good. And so there actually was like a pretty expensive networking infrastructure investment. And the way that I used to be at Google Ventures, and Google obviously has incredible networking, but when I talked about some of the networking team there, they were relatively skeptical of the architecture. But just for me as a consumer, I felt like there was a huge performance difference in Zoom 3 to 4 years ago than there was in other video conferencing. And that's where it came from to me. And, just having no jitter glitching was just a huge deal. And I think others have actually caught up over the last few years. And so I don't think they have as big of a kind of performance improvement over others today, but it was major 3 to 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I guess it's obvious. It looks like Scott is having problems. I thought only California has power shutoffs. Sounds like New York has the same problem too. Well, he'll join us when I guess he'll figure out where to plug his phone or something. Yeah, okay. So when the crisis started in March, most of the funds were in this mode, let's wait and see and deal with the portfolio companies, do the triage. And then if you look at the investment numbers today, actually the number is higher than the same period even last year. What do you think is happening? I think that from what I see, the checks are becoming bigger and bigger. And of course, you guys have big funds, but what will happen to early stage investors and the companies who are looking to raise $1 million or $2 million and big funds want to invest 30, 40, 50, right? So can you comment on that? That overall numbers went up, but the investments in the early stage deals actually are quite low.
Well, Sasha, before we go answer your question, since I was off, but I was still able to hear the discussion, I just wanted to come back on sort of process. And I think that one thing that using Zoom has allowed us to do, and probably everybody, is to process more deals because we're all spending less time traveling. And for those of us maybe who are international and focused, sort of on a broad geography, in our case, Europe and the US, I think that we just have more time. And I've also found that in terms of networking with larger and more prominent venture capital investors, like the folks on this call, they're more available at the moment. And so I think that, we've been able to have more dialogues with companies. We've been able to have more dialogues with investors, and that's allowed us to process in some ways more, let's say, workflow. And that's been great. I do agree with Pitch, of course, that, there's no substitute for meeting people in person. And we'll see, whether the, increased number of investments we're making result in more whiffs because we weren't able to be in the same room as people. But I do think that it's been a very productive time once we got through that initial period of concern, that sort of 2-month period right after March.
Mm-hmm. And then are you going to comment on the question I've just asked about the investment? Or you wanted just to comment on the previous one?
We're a Series A fund, and I think that we haven't noticed a huge difference out here in terms of check sizes, other than what we see as generally been a problem, or not a problem, but generally been a tendency, let's say, over a long period of time, where the large funds are getting larger, and we tend to think that creates opportunities for smaller players like us.
Yeah, what are you in London?
I'll build on Giles' point because I think they're related. His comments are deeply related to your question, Sasha, which I think one of the reasons why kind of the investment pace the last 7 months has been at an all-time high is just that people have, investors and founders have more time. Like kind of no one is doing anything but work. And so the timeline to schedule the next meeting has gotten compressed meaningfully, like instead of needing to juggle everyone's schedules of commuting, someone has a board meeting and, then they need to commute 5 hours back to San Francisco or whatever. Just we're getting meetings that day or the next morning, and people are meeting at 7 a.m. or 10 p.m. at night. And so the time scale to make decisions is compressing dramatically, and then deals are getting more competitive. And so I think that's one big piece. It's just the total amount of time being spent by investors is greater right now than under normal circumstances. Another is like the financial liquidity, where look at the tech stocks the last, in April when the markets were, March when the markets were getting shellacked, I think the pace was slower in March, but in April when the markets were coming back, and it may just be a fluke, but that's when the investment pace really started to spike and it's held at that level. And I think part of it is this digital future that we've all been talking about. I think people are just seeing that the total market opportunity for tech companies has expanded dramatically in the last 6 months, and kind of it creates more investment opportunities than there was even 6 months ago. Just you look at the percent of the S&P that's tech stocks now, for example, and I think investors are trying to kind of go after this increased TAM.
Your question really had to do with why are there fewer startups, small startups? One answer is because so much money is available if a deal looks hot, that the model of starting a company, then building some credibility by building a product or starting sales, and then raising money later is the model that was true for a long time. But there are so many billion-dollar funds or hundreds of billion-dollar funds that they can and do make a bet, if you want to call it that, on young companies from the very beginning, and so that they spend a lot of money on marketing and that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So the answer to the question is there are probably plenty of startups, but the idea of the small startup that gets going with very little capital is a very difficult model these days. Since I retired from active venture capital, and we have a venture capital firm we're related to, I've been doing some little sort of deals that seem interesting and small and need guidance. A couple of women entrepreneurs actually, and I don't think, and I think one of them in particular will probably be able to build up and get further financing, but we're not able to spend a lot of money on marketing. It's all on development and customer contacts. So, but this isn't the venture capital business. This is just me doing it. The answer to the question though is it'll be a lot more startups. There'll be plenty of startups, but they'll be financed heavily from the beginning. They won't have the classic a few $100,000 type of investments.
Yep. But so the previous panel.
I think the numbers also skewed because companies are staying private longer. And so if you just look at dollars, there's more later stage investment. That actually would have been public market investment years ago, but now with the very large funds and the ability to stay private longer, you see more quote unquote later stage or private money in those numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So in the previous panel, all of you, each one of you has said that for a company to grab your attention, they need to have this unique value proposition. Now, if everything is online, how do the companies find you? They cannot just be sending you emails and text messages, right? But if there is an opportunity for a chance encounter anymore, then how do these companies find you? Sean?
This is a great question. I mean, I think most VCs are taking more meetings right now than ever before. And so on the one hand, it's maybe easier, but everyone is just overwhelmed with the amount of inbound. And so unfortunately, as an investor, you need to be selective with the meetings you take. And I'll just say, for myself personally, I try to think about opportunities in two buckets. One is the things that I think are very well kind of tailored, calibrated, maybe, and this is the trope, but like, someone that I know or someone that I know who knows someone. And so there's kind of an introduction that you trust. And then the other categories, I try to really think about blue sky opportunities. Like, I mean, I probably meet with 1 in every 20 cold messages that comes into my inbox. And I mean, I do read every email that comes into my inbox. And so it's really kind of those are probably the two buckets for myself personally.
Thing was true now and wasn't true years ago. There's plenty of big venture funds, especially in places like Palo Alto. There's a lot of people who were in a startup and made several tens of millions of dollars, and they are available to get things going. Like we used to call doctors and dentists deals when they were profitable occupations, but there's money available that isn't professional, but is experienced in startups. So the existence of these dozens of families around the peninsula who have investable money but are not terribly wealthy by modern standards, they're an important factor for startups. I think we'll see, as far as how do you meet somebody? Somebody wants to have a startup. He may know somebody with money who'll back him. Also, I think people know of Sequoia and NEA and all that, and they try to find some way of meeting them, because I get lots of inquiries from people who want to start companies. Is some way I can meet? I will start naming the funds, but you all know who they are that have the fame. Then there's the new famous funds as well, like Anderson et al. So the answer to the question is that how do you find deals? You have to make yourself available. You have to be out in public so people hear of you, because so many people, venture firms are so well now known compared to how they were almost unknown 30 years ago when I was doing it. The young firm starting either has to be able to meet the big time guys who have the money, or they have to get themselves known. And sometimes lawyers and accountants come to you. They think somebody wants to start a company, then they will tell you about a client of theirs that needs money. That's a pretty good source as well.
Yep. Norm, do you agree?
I think that the networking is still networking, and whether you're doing it in person or you're doing it electronically, it's your friends, your inner circle, and then your friends of friends. And as Pitch said, the industry has evolved, and so leading venture firms are all quite visible these days. It's not hard to find us. It's just a question of getting that initial introduction from someone in your network. And there's nothing like getting a warm introduction as opposed to just a cold call. So if Scott or Sean or Pitch, say, hey, you should talk to this person, I will talk to that person. If somebody just shoots me a cold email, I may or may not respond.
Yeah, so it's all the same thing, and I guess the network should continue. But then I just got a comment, I should not be looking down reading messages, but I'm reading messages because the audience is sending questions. So that's what I'm doing. I'm not being disrespectful. And one of the questions I've got is if this chance meeting is not an option again, and we are in Silicon Valley, and you cannot just go down on University Avenue, have coffee, and bump into someone who's an entrepreneur, who's an investor, what will happen to Silicon Valley? If we don't need to be here physically, the company asks, then what will happen to Silicon Valley? Will it stay? Will it be more of a mindset now? Like, what will happen? What do you think? Will Silicon Valley remain relevant? That was the question.
Well, as someone who's not in Silicon Valley, let me say the death of Silicon Valley has been predicted many times, and its replacement has been named many times, and I haven't seen it yet. So I think that while I think we will be doing more Zoom calls in the future, I think that personal meetings will resume, and having a huge amount of engineering talent, entrepreneurial energy, money, and experience, as well as some really large tech firms all the way up the West Coast, is going to continue to be a huge advantage for Silicon Valley, and something that other places aspire to, but don't reach.
I think there's also a positive entrepreneurial culture here. You can go to many parts of the world and they don't necessarily support entrepreneurialism. And here in Silicon Valley, it's celebrated. And I think that culture here will continue for decades to come.
I remember in one of the first GTS meetings, there was a question, can Silicon Valley be replicated? And Pitch was a keynote, and Pitch, do you remember when he said no? Because each country wants to have its own Silicon Valley. But now, can you think of other places in the world or other states in the US where you believe entrepreneurship is as active as it is here in Silicon Valley?
I think it's unlikely that anywhere is as active as Silicon Valley, except maybe Beijing or Shenzhen for hardware. But on the one hand, I totally agree with everyone that I think Silicon Valley has a huge advantage over anywhere else that will endure for decades. But I also think that there are other cities that are emerging and aren't even close to the level of Silicon Valley. But I think that the world is flat is kind of going to apply to tech, and that the highest probability place to start a huge company will be in Silicon Valley, but I think we're already seeing that it's gotten a lot easier to start a big company other places as well. And I think the hubs are the obvious ones of New York, London, Los Angeles, are probably the major ones. Then there's Seattle, Boston, Washington, DC has a few interesting ones, like Paris. Anyways, I think we're going to definitely see a flattening of the industry.
I do think that the U.S., Silicon Valley is in the U.S. obviously, and the U.S. has a huge advantage because, it's the fourth biggest country by or the third biggest country by population in the world, and it's a rich country on top of that. And so, when you sit in Europe, a lot of the countries in Europe are quite small. They might be part of a single market. They might be in Eastern Europe, but they're smaller from a population standpoint. They're divided by language, and having a large single market which shares a language and is in some ways homogenous. I think the U.S. it's a real advantage. And so when you look at other places that can have, really huge markets like that going forward, you clearly look to India and China. They're nowhere near as rich, but the growth rates in both countries are impressive. They produce lots of engineers. I think that in different ways they do have quite entrepreneurial cultures. But boy, there's a way to go before they can match what Silicon Valley has been able to produce.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if you can hear me, Sasha. Do you see me now?
Oh, yes, you have.
Sorry, I've been on for a while, but I did have some more technical difficulties. I think Silicon Valley is being virtualized, and it's been going on for quite a while. It's clearly a hub, and I think it'll continue to be a hub. But I think what we see happening in our portfolio is that companies that are starting in Silicon Valley are challenged by the cost structure of Silicon Valley and the inability to recruit talent in the way that it used to be possible with the immigration laws of old. And so, most of our companies scale only to a certain point now before deciding they need to have an office somewhere else. And all the cities that have been named are popular destinations. So I think on the one hand, Silicon Valley will endure and have an advantage for a long time, but I don't think it's what it was even 10 years ago in terms of being a dominant center of technology innovation. And clearly what's happened in China in the last decade suggests that there's at least one other, country that has a growing, I'll call it an innovation economy at scale. So, so I think it's a trend that started. It will continue. It'll be important for a long time, but I don't think it'll ever again be like the epicenter that it once was. Personal view.
Yeah, just got another message from someone actually in London. They want to, they're online right now. They want to know if the government should interfere with the work of big companies. And we all know the names of those companies. Like it's mostly Google and Facebook and Twitter. Should the government be attempting to split them up? Is it an actual monopoly? If, what do you think about that? Should the government interfere with the work with tech companies that have become so big?
I think that there's a couple of issues here. One is the absolute size of the companies, which people can debate. There's nothing wrong with becoming a monopoly as long as you do that legally. I think the issue is if you have become a monopoly, whether you're IBM or Microsoft or AT&T, some of the newer names, are you abusing that monopoly position and perhaps illegally tying your monopoly service to some other product or taking advantage of your customers or the marketplace in that way? I think that'll continue to be an active discussion.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think the government should enforce in the jurisdiction should enforce the laws of that country, antitrust legislation. I think for us, as human beings, what we want to see, I think, is innovation, and we want to see founders and managers be rewarded for running companies that are innovating and delivering value. And when companies become monopolies, sometimes that stops. Sometimes we know when we're having a product forced on us, as I see Microsoft Teams open automatically on my desktop every time I log in at work. And I think that it's important for governments to, let's say, enforce the rules.
This is an old problem in the United States. going back to John D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan and those guys. They were very successful and very good at what they did, and they have built great companies that have been the backbone of the economy. And so now we have a new generation of, I will start naming them. But if you're going to be successful, you're going to build a company that's dominant, and the difference between dominance and abusive monopoly, there's a substantial difference there. So I think we want to encourage people to build these great companies and not overtax them or make it impossible to build a big company. But I sort of I'll go along with you, Giles, that we should enforce the laws and the behavior of companies, not to encourage competition, but in ways if they're abusive, particularly as to suppressing competition, other than by being better than the other guy, then we have to, that's where the line is drawn.
You know, and I'll add just a little bit of a UK experience. I mean, you know, Amazon is one of the companies that's frequently mentioned. We have a lot of upstart logistics companies in the UK, but through the early days of the pandemic, when people couldn't find toilet paper, it was Amazon that was continuing to make deliveries. Sometimes the big companies have network effects, or they're just so well run or so innovative that they're really delivering value too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Another question I've just received, because we're moving toward the end of our session, and it's pretty much open.
Sasha, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make a comment on that last question. Is that, you know, I think the rules should absolutely be enforced by, you know, for companies, but I wish there were rules for governments as well, and someone could enforce the rules on the governments, because I really do feel like there is a full frontal assault on a lot of companies and corporate interests right now that, you know, is going to hold back a lot of economies in a virtual flat global world. So sorry for the political comment, but something that has
It's hard not to make a political comment these days. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, we try not to make political comments, but at the same time, we're a free platform, and we encourage people to have an opinion and express their opinion. It's okay to disagree. That's what makes GTS beautiful, I think, that in our audience, we're people on all kinds of political ends, but they're all together believing and building good companies. So people are free to comment the way they want. Another question I received just now is, when once in a while in the venture community, there will be a buzzword, and then venture funds are moving like nobody wanted to touch the social network field, say 10 years ago. Then yes, it's popular. Now there is a word sustainability and impact. Do you have an opinion on that? What is it for you? How is it impacting your investment style? So we're commenting on sustainability, please.
Well, I'm not quite sure it's the exact same thing, Sasha, but we think of them as mission-driven companies, companies that are started for a purpose other than just producing a profit for shareholders. And we really like these kind of companies, and we like them because the employees tend to be more passionate and driven and capable of going through thicker walls or over walls when the going gets tough, because they're not just dedicated to making money. They tend to attract better employees who will do the same. And they even inspire investors who care about the mission that they're pursuing. And so oftentimes these companies turn out to be better companies for the investors. So we see this as an increasingly prevalent theme among the kinds of companies that are getting started today. I think it's perhaps because the millennial generation has more of a strong bias towards making an impact in the world, maybe than previous generations, which I think is going to turn out to be a really good thing.
Yeah, view it exactly the same as Scott. You know, I call these, or we call these, double bottom line companies. And, you know, those are personally my favorite types of companies to partner with. And on sustainability, in addition to all of that, whenever you have an incredibly large and acute problem, there's oftentimes an opportunity to make a lot of money by solving portions of that problem. And, you know, clean tech, sustainability tech oftentimes has a bad reputation amongst investors because of the returns of, you know, 2005 to 2020. But I mean, personally, just look at the fires in the West recently, including, you know, Colorado right now, a lot of other problems. I believe that climate change is going to be one of the more acute problems of the next decade, and there will be an opportunity to make a huge amount of money while also trying to solve some of the negative effects of that. And so very much excited about the sector.
Yep.
I agree with the desirability of double bottom line investing. I just want to make sure that there actually are two bottom lines, and that it's doing social good, but also profitable. We've seen so many proposals where they're just going to do social good, but they're never going to ever achieve profitability. And you have to do both to be a successful impact investor. You can be an impact investor, but you also have to be successful.
Yeah, I agree. And I think ultimately these companies follow the market. And you know, you see a company like Submer, which was presented here today, which looks like that kind of a company, which is obviously doing something which is sustainable, reducing demand for energy and using electricity in a more sustainable manner, but getting paid to do it. And you know, that's terrific. And what's harder is when you might have a solution that appears to be better for the environment, which is, you know, a bit of a hazy term, but I think we know what we're talking about. But maybe, you know, the time horizon for that improvement is a long one. And many of us have a need to show returns in the shorter term. I mean, maybe we're not public companies that are showing quarter by quarter returns, and I hope we're all more thoughtful than that. But what you need sometimes is consumers also to take an interest in the environment and essentially be willing to pay more for a service that is green. And I think that's what you're seeing sometimes with millennials who are going to brand certain kinds of services greener and be willing to pay for them. But, you know, what's green and what's not green and who's making that judgment is always hard. And I think that's why we like the market, because we trust the market more than sometimes we trust, for instance, a government or some sort of third-party body.
Yeah. So it has to be beyond financial returns, obviously, but to Norm's point, people should not confuse charity and the impact investments, because we are in business of making money for our investors. So it's really good. But speaking of markets, how do you comment on the behavior of our stock market? The economy is, well, sort of struggling. The crisis is impacting everything we do, and the stock market is going through the roof. My personal explanation is that it's one of the companies that, Scott, actually you were invested in, called Robinhood, creating all these new customers who never played in the stock market before. So Scott, will you comment on that, or is that something you're not going to comment on?
Well, certainly Robinhood is one of these tremendous beneficiaries of the you know, COVID tailwinds, if you will. But, and that may have, I think, on the margin, you know, the whole premise of the company. It's a mission-driven company. They want to democratize access to the financial markets, and primarily they serve the millennial community with a wonderfully simple mobile application that allows people to trade stock for free. So, you know, there's, as they've grown in popularity, they're providing more access to more people to trade in the stock market, which is a good thing. But I don't think that's the primary driver. I know there's speculation about that. I don't think that's the primary driver. I think it's as simple as two things. One is $6 trillion of stimulus that the government has pumped into the economy to make up for what was missing when many businesses went away. And the two interest rate cuts that the Federal Reserve has made, bringing interest rates to almost zero. I mean, all other things being equal, if you reduce interest rates, you make asset values go up, including the assets that are traded in the stock market. So I think, you know, the stock market's, you know, growth in value over the last 2 quarters is not entirely difficult to understand. It's really a question of whether it will continue.
I think as well that a significant portion of the stock market increase can be accounted for by large tech's performance. And, that's not surprising when, you go around the world and you see everyone is using Amazon. I mean, in many markets now, folks are, at least in Western Europe and the States, everyone's got an Apple device, smart speaker. I mean, you just see an explosion. You're not surprised these companies are so valuable because you're kind of surrounded by them all the time. And I do think that they're creating, a huge amount of the increase in the stock market that you see.
Mhm.
And the
Yep.
last thing, which is related to Scott's comments, but so on the one hand, we have this acceleration towards tech and digital that was probably going to take 5 more years to get where we are now. And on the other hand, given the state of the world, there's not really other asset classes to make money in. Historically, like commercial real estate is completely distressed right now, and a lot of the legacy industries are hurting. Interest rates are so low, so capital's not in bonds. Anyways, it just tech stocks are kind of the most obvious place to be holding your assets right now.
Mhm. Okay. Another question I've received: in your portfolio companies, is there still a practice to outsource their R&D to other parts of the world? And if yes, then where? Is it Eastern Europe? Is it China? Is it India? Do your portfolio companies still outsource R&D or outside the US? Yes, no, maybe?
Depends on
I just say what I said earlier, which is that, whereas 20 years ago, our companies would grow their operations almost entirely inside the US and inside of Silicon Valley, then they started outsourcing to places like India and China. I think more recently they're outsourcing to other parts of the world, but they're very definitely outsourcing. And some of it is for the immigration issues that I mentioned before. Some of it is cost driven. Some of it is purely access to talent. There's a huge shortage of technical talent in Silicon Valley, which is why the costs are high. And when you compare that to the costs in Eastern Europe, Europe itself, Canada, all sorts of places, there are pockets of talent that companies are taking advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
We're originally a Ukrainian firm, and so this is a question that we're have all the time, and I think that there's a couple of things happening. I mean, one thing is what I agree absolutely with everything Scott has said about the cost basis on the west coast of the U.S. I think the other thing is that around the world, folks are speaking better and better English. We can all debate whether or not that's a good thing for the world or not, but we can certainly agree that it makes it easier for collaboration between the U.S. and these other markets. And then whether it's Zoom, whether it's WebEx, whether it's other collaborative working tools, I think the ability to divide the work up into pieces and parcel it out has also become better. So I think it's just easier to do it now successfully. And so I think that that's a trend which is going to continue. And certainly from the perspective of the rest of the world, it's a wonderful trend. And I know that in our building in Kiev, in which ICU is headquartered, boy, in the old days, that would have been some banks, some insurance companies, maybe an oligarch's gas holding. And now it's 13 floors of tech companies and firms that are outsourced, where the Ukrainians are getting American style salaries. I mean, obviously there's still a delta there, but that delta shrinks as the race for competition continues, and that's great value creation for other parts of the world.
Yeah, agree with everything's been said. One statistic I learned recently that was really surprising to me is that Europe has 5.2 million software engineers. The US has 4.8 million. So there are more software engineers in Europe than in the US. A few of the companies I work with have had just tremendous success working with engineers, especially in Eastern Europe. And one comment on that, as someone that did a PhD in mathematics, the Soviet education system in mathematics was spectacular. And I think you see that that's great mathematics education is the foundation oftentimes of being, or at least a gateway to being a great programmer. And so you have this double whammy of more engineers, and I think oftentimes even better engineers, at least on the individual contributor level. And the gap of what's been lacking in the past has been the engineering management, where there's been more management experience coming out of Silicon Valley. And I think there still is a pretty big gap, but it's shrinking as there's more and more successful companies in Europe. And also people from the West willing and excited to move there.
Yep. So we're approaching the end of our session. There will be a couple more questions, and then we'll gather for a selfie. You know, we have to do that, right? So one more question. Could there be a productivity problem with work from home that haven't been acknowledged yet? What do you think? Is it an absolutely good thing for people to work from home, or there would be issues that we're not seeing yet, but maybe that will be an opportunity for other startups to address them? What do you think? Any issues from working from home? Productivity issues?
Well, boy, I mean, I worry about depression issues. I mean, I think that even those of us who enjoy our work a great deal, when we're working from home, find it very hard to separate home life from work life. And I think that all of us now are just working more hours. This has been a trend, but it's also a trend that has accelerated since the pandemic started this year. And I think we're taking calls at all hours. And this isn't a pity party for me or anyone on this panel. We're all lucky to have jobs and be working and doing something we enjoy. But I think that that's a trend which is happening across the board. And boy, I think we're going to see some repercussions from that. So I worry about mental health.
Why would you think? I know the facts are that you're correct. What do you think about it is causing people to be depressed or upset? It's just the inability to get away from the everyday problems of family, and so we all thought we'd go off to work and then come back and have dinner with the kids and all that stuff. But the fact we're around all the time, is that what your view is of why?
No, not in my case. I mean, I think, of course, one issue could be just if you were maybe in a small place and just didn't have space, and that would certainly be very stressful. But I mean, I think what I was talking more about is the inability to just turn off and read a book, watch a movie, go for a walk. I think that people just have, even though you think that being at home would create more personal time for you, I actually find that most people feel like it's created the opposite. Less time for reflection, less time to meditate, less time to sort of turn off. And I think that's dangerous. That's where I was coming at it from, Pitch.
We're spending a lot less time on travel. Most people live, let's say, a half hour from work. And so there's an hour a day, and bigger for many people, that I'm surprised that people are, I mean, you're correct. I can't argue the fact. I'm surprised people don't find time. I've discovered I've been wasting evenings on baseball on TV. I haven't done that before, and I probably shouldn't spend that much time, but it was such a relief to get back to live TV once in a while. I don't see why you're right, but you are.
I don't want to be right. And I've been reading a lot. I've been reading about the War of the Roses lately. So I mean, the time is there, but you've just got to be able to say, you know, that you're not going to pick up the phone or look at the messages for a little while. And people feel, I think in the old days, they would say, well, I've left the office now, so I can actually turn off the phone for a few hours. But now they're working from home and they feel like, well, I never left the office. This is the office. I better have it on. And that's what I'm talking about.
I think the other contributing factor, I agree, Giles, with what you said, but I think the other contributing factor is the tremendous uncertainty in the world, which I think is a cause for, you know, being unsettled and maybe depressed. And the third factor is just the lack of social interaction. I think we all love to see those we care about, and being restricted from being able to do that, it gets to be really old after a while.
Yeah, I know when we were debating with the team whether we should skip this year of GTS because we cannot get together, or do it online. And I'm not a huge fan of online gatherings, but that's the only thing that's available to us now. And we decided that no, we will make it happen. And yes, this is not optimal. But it's better than not seeing each other. What we'll do now, if you guys take a couple minutes, do closing statements, each one of you. Then we will take a selfie. That is, we'll smile on the camera, and Ilya and Natalie will take a picture. And then we will open up the whole platform. Everybody who is now listening silently and you're not visible, will let you all back in, and we'll have a virtual networking. Now, as for the panelists, you guys can stay for that happy moment, or you are free to leave, because I promised you that you'll be done by 11, and you guys are great. It's been terrific 2 hours. So please, closing statements, couple minutes, whatever you want to say to the audience. There are several hundred people watching us all over the world. So say whatever you want to say, and then we take a selfie, and we will see you in person next time. Please go in whatever order.
Sasha, I want to thank you for organizing this. You've been doing it for many years. This is the first year it's been virtual, but I found this to be a very enjoyable session to get to see Pitch and Sean and Scott, and then the rest of the panelists to get to meet Jails here. It's been a real pleasure. In terms of the audience at large, I say continue to be optimistic. We have a crisis in front of us, but we're an adaptable species. We live in the Amazon, we live in the Arctic, we live everywhere else. We'll get through this and we'll prosper. It'll just be a new normal, but it will be a new normal.
I think that's absolutely right, Norm. And I wish everybody luck, and please reach out to us if we can be helpful to you.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Well said, Norm. And I would just say for the entrepreneurs on the line, like, being an entrepreneur is incredibly hard. Just stay persistent. You got to swing 100 times to hit a home run. You just keep taking risks, and best of luck.
I guess as venture capitalists, our job is to build great companies that in the long term serve the society, and to get rewarded for that financially. If you go directly after the financial rewards, you're probably going to find this frustration, and entirely possible you may not serve the society as is necessary in the long run.
And I'll say also thank you to Sasha, thank you to the panelists, and to everybody. This too shall pass. In the meantime, do keep an open mind, and pick up that book, and do turn off the phone from time to time, and embrace new ideas and new ways of thinking. We're all as young as we want to be.
And go outside and smell the roses. We will see us all soon in person or online. Thank you again. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for you guys. All right, now, Natalie, you tell us what to do. We need to take a picture of the panelists. Or Ilya, one of you, please.
Yeah, I'll take the screenshots. So 1, 2, 3. One more time, just a second. 1, 2, 3. Okay, great.
Thank you so much. Now, Ilya, you started meeting people in? How does it work?
I will start letting people,
Yeah.
yes, I will start letting people in, and I'll transition everyone from attendees to panelists.
Okay, all right, so now it's networking time, and if it's evening where you guys are, you can have a glass of wine. Imagine it's a reception, and we'll see when you show up, we'll talk, and whoever wants to stay, if people need to go, then go. Then I'll just say again, thank you again. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Sasha.
I'm not saying goodbye,
Thank
because
you.
some people will stay. Okay.
Hey everyone.
Okay. So I guess we'll see more windows.
Yes, we see already.
So if somebody is already online, you can start talking. That will be your opportunity, because when 100 people shows up, it will be noisy. I guess we can talk. So Giles, how is London? How is the weather?
Well, one thing I've been doing is I actually have been coming to the office, and I find that routine is very nice for me. And I ride a bike, and well, the weather is terrible as usual, so I get drenched every day. But it reminds you that you're alive.
Right. Yeah, we're having another heat wave. So Ilya, is anybody else showing up? Oh, Andy is there. Hi, Andy. How are you? Unmute yourself.
I'm on mute. Hi, Sasha. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Great session. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was fun. Next time in person.
Uh,
Roman.
Fingers crossed.
Good morning to us. Good evening to us. I actually have a question, just a little bit following on a discussion, since respected gentlemen are still here, and we've been coming pretty often to the Silicon Valley and have been meeting a lot of funds that would say that their strategy would be to invest in a 30-mile radius, sort of, meaning that people wouldn't look into kind of international opportunities. Now that the virtual kind of world is taking over, with people kind of being in the same shoes and doing due diligence over Zoom, regardless where you sit, has a strategy been changing for Silicon Valley-based funds? Would they be looking now more kind of globally, internationally, or the 30-mile radius rule still kind of sticks?
Who are you addressing the question to? I think we're done with an official discussion, but I don't know. Andy, do you want to answer that question since you're still on? Because you guys work internationally everywhere.
I think the answer, Roman, from my view, is it kind of depends. not a great answer, but certainly for a certain cadre of investors, global investors, some of those who are on the panel today, they've been investing globally for quite some time, typically at the growth stage. I think if you're an early stage entrepreneur operating internationally, it's still, in many respects, your question just reflects the notion that venture is still a local activity, and in many respects that continues to be true, even though you can expand that a bit, saying maybe, well, a Silicon Valley investor may invest in a New York company. So it's beyond the bike ride, I'd say, but going international, I think, is still limited to specialists in larger investors for the most part, I think.
Yep. Who else has joined? Do you guys want to say anything or just want to listen? Any other questions? Just Andrei, say hi to everyone. Did you say, Zakharenko, that Hawaii will be open? Yeah, are you taking
Hawaii will be open,
Hawaii?
exactly. I've actually, I mean, I always enjoy listening. I think I've been to a lot of them. It was great. As everyone knows, I'm in the travel business, but I am trying to also become more of a sustainable travel business out of this. There's a lot of COVID questions, a lot of places you can't go and can't go, but I actually use And Beyond, which is they're both environmentally sustainable and 40% profitable as a business model, to see how we can reinvent ourselves. Because I'm kind of entrepreneur in heart. I also love to travel, so I'm like, let's figure out what we can do in COVID while everyone is panicking and thinking that the business is going out. But I enjoyed the listening, but also the whole big companies. Yeah, my point of view is Amazon is sometimes also anti-competitive. There's cases where they've kind of just copied other products. They did that with somebody used Prime with Peloton. So it's interesting, as I mentioned in the comments, when a government is 65 and over and doesn't know how technology works, having seen the Facebook hearings, it's how are they supposed to manage tech? So that's kind of my viewpoint, is that young people who need to know the things need to be in government and setting up these regulations. hearing those like Facebook hearings and other hearings, you're just like, they don't understand anything. Like, and so how can they make decisions? So anyway. But good to see everyone. And yeah.
See you. So Alexander Soroka, you've done all this startup network, all these events all over the world. Which region has been the most active if you were to compare Europe, Asia, US when it comes to startups participating?
Give you the answer, but before it, I have really the question to Pitch. I wanna Johnson. I wanna ask him. So Pitch, you said that in today's world there is no space for the startup that raise just 500K or something like that. So can you clarify this point of view?
Yeah, did you hear me effectively say there's no room for startups? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, so this is a very small amount of money for startup, and today the startups must raise much more than before.
I'd say it's a difficult. The answer to your question is, I certainly implied that, but there are many exceptions to it, and I did add in the fact that there's lots of families around with tens of millions of dollars that there wasn't true before. So the answer to your question is there'll be fewer startups because more people will try to raise more money to start with. So they're startups, all right, but they're going to be startups with hundreds of thousands or even a few $1 million in them. What is going to be missing is the small do-it-yourself startup with tens of millions, not tens of millions, a couple $100,000. There will be fewer of those than there have been in the past. I guess I would stick with that statement. But there are more people around who can do those little startups, and we may find that if they can do a startup and then feel confident of raising enough money later to compete with the big money, then we'll see it. The answer to your question, though, is I did say that, but I'm moderating, I guess, what I said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sasha, answering to the question, probably this time the most active battles were in England, in UK. I don't know why, but if to say generally, the countries which have good universities usually have much more good startups. So this is probably the conclusion from all our Unicorn Corp.
Okay.
I'll add to that, Alexander. I mean, I still think that the prevalence of English is very important, and I don't think it's right, but I think it is a fact. And I think that in Europe, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are very happy to move to the UK because they know they can work in English here. And if they move to Germany, yes, everybody in Germany, Germans speak wonderful English, and but a lot of folks who are in Bulgaria these days, you know, they don't learn German in school like they might have learned 25 years ago. They learn English, and that's the same even in Italy, and it's certainly the same in Turkey. And it means that folks feel very comfortable coming, at least from a language standpoint, to the US, to the UK. And I think that the kind of cultural dominance the US has made folks very comfortable with it. And it's a real advantage to be a welcoming place. And I think that when you can attract great talent, it's really helpful. And it's especially helpful when you're attracting talent from places that really teach math and engineering, you know, very, very, very well. And I think that that's happening still in the UK and the US.
Yep. Well, we'll hang for another 5 minutes. If people want to say anything, please do it now. If not, then just I'll say.
This is Vish Mishra. I just want to congratulate you. Wonderfully done. Yeah, thank you. And you know, seeing all the, you know, I mean, all the panelists were just fantastic. The entrepreneurs. I really was very impressed with the global entrepreneurs presenting, you know, at the Global Technology Symposium. And good to see Pitch and Norm and Scott and, you know, all the wonderful people. So, and Andy's there, okay. And what I'm missing is not socializing, not being able to be there and have a glass of wine and some appetizers that you know,
Yeah, I know, but that was better than.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vish. I'm so happy that you were able to join.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
well done. Very well
also,
done.
while we're here, I want to say a huge thank you to the team that made it all possible. We have Ilya still on the screen, thank you. We have Natalie, we have Anna, I don't know, left, Alexander. Thank you, my sponsors, Giles, Roman. Thank you, my partner, Anna. And of course, thank you to panelists. And thank you for Pitch for sticking to the end. And yes, we are on time. And with that, nice
From all
seeing you.
attendees, big round of applause.
Thank you all, and we know how to stay connected. Please stay connected. Be well, be safe, and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Great event. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week ahead. Keep healthy, stay safe.
Bye.
Europe.
To all of you.